Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be comparing the player models from Grand Theft Auto 3 and its definitive version remake. Thank you for your time, thank you for your viewership, and let's begin. As always, we begin with the polygon count. The GTA 3 player character Claude, well they're both Claude, but has about 1.5k polygons. This is because he's the main character. I've actually taken a look at the other NPCs from the game, and their models usually range anywhere from 200 polygons to about 500. He has 1005 because he's the main one, the one you're going to be seeing on screen. Our definitive model has 30,000 polygons, which, I understand they're no longer held to the same limitations as a PlayStation 2 console, but I still feel like this is a little bit excessive because, yes, I appreciate that they still tried to maintain the stylized look of it, but they took a really wrong departure where they tried to make it a bit more realistic with the higher polygon count. Because I always felt like GTA models are a bit stylized. It's sort of not full realistic, it's like its own little cartoony crime world. At least that's how I saw it. But now let's head over and just talk about the general result of it, the way the models look. The first thing you notice is that the GTA 3 Claude is a bit more segmented, very clearly segmented, than the one in the definitive edition. This is because, if you remember, GTA 3 was actually quite a gory game. People used to lose limbs when you shoot them off. When a grenade goes off, people literally blow up into pieces. And this is a very elegant, like 2000s, we ain't got much memory to do with this method of doing it, where you just model it in segments and then you can just detach or make them disappear when they go off, which is pretty good. But other than that, as you can tell, like I said, they tried to make these, to stylize them a little bit. Maybe it's, something graphical imitation, something art direction. Maybe it's in between those two. But it ended up sort of giving it its own aesthetic, if you will. Kind of like how 8-bit is considered its own aesthetic. Meanwhile, that one was also born of hardware limitation. And also, as you can see, his hands are one big mitt. It's just like all spruced together because, again, we were trying to cut as many corners as we can. The definitive edition guy, yes, he does have a hand and individual fingers, but the problem is when they tried to add more detail, it ruined it, in my opinion. Yes, it kept the same spirit, but it refused to speak the same language. Now, it's, we look at them both side by side, you see that yes, this would be the next logical step to this one, but the problem is they fell for the whole mistake, which sometimes I fall for as well, which is more realistic means better. Not necessarily. I would have wanted to see the next evolution of this, but the definitive one literally just looks like you took it and you threw it in a little AI thing and said make it real, and then it came out the other side. So had they leaned a bit more into the segmenting of it, into the not segmenting, had they leaned a bit more into making it look a bit more stylized than realistic, would have gotten much out of held the result of it much higher. But this is still good. Okay, it's still very impressive as a standalone model on its own, but there's a real dissonance I'm feeling here between like the form and the shade of it, because the shade is more realistic, form is a bit more cartoony, and they didn't blend it the best, in my opinion. If you want to see a game that does like stylized realism really well, look at one of my favorite games of all time, Bioshock Infinite. But maybe I'm being a bit biased here. Now let's head on over and talk about the shaders. Simpler times, simpler times. The GTA 3, which came out in 2001, only used to have one shader. That was the diffuse, the color one. So it's a very what you see is what you get type of shader. And I've said this before in a previous video. I really wondered what it was like to be a 3D artist back then, because now to be a 3D artist, there's so much other stuff you gotta learn, so much like, all this business, like shadering and texturing can be its own thing. But back then it was just sort of like part and parcel of the whole process. But yeah, one diffuse, one map, That's what you used to use with for the GTA 3 back in the PS2. The definitive remake, though, like I mentioned, tried to lean into the realism a little bit more, and I can see this because it has a normal, it has a specularity, and a roughness map. And that was one complaint that I heard that people had for the definitive edition. They said that everything looked so greasy and shiny. This is why. Okay, we had some very, very hard specularity, some very, very hard normal maps because, again, some could call it that Unreal Engine stink. I don't know, but it was trying to do that with it and end up being detrimental to it. Like, I've seen a lot of fan-made like remakes and remodels, and they understand what I was saying earlier about GTA 3 being the models being stylized, not necessarily realistic, because I personally never saw them as realistic. So these shaders are also part of the reason why it was so demanding and so demolishing for your processor. Because that's one complaint a lot of people used to had. I remember back then they said, this game, doesn't look so demanding. Why is it melting my processor? Why am I getting trash frame rates on a game like this? I shouldn't be happening. It's these bad boys, okay? It's processing all these textures, at least 2 or 3 per every material, accompanied with the way higher than necessary polygon count for this model. So again, maybe it was just rushed. Maybe it was, meddling of higher ups. I don't know. But this definitive model doesn't really impress me that much, if I'm being honest. I'd actually go as far as saying the OG one is better, simply because it's, speaking its own language, it's doing its own thing, and it knows exactly what it is. And stop trying to be, part of something that was essentially never meant to be. Because nobody ever said, oh, early GTAs looked real. We all knew they looked a bit wonk, but that was part of the charm. So, next up, for this segment, we're just gonna peruse around the model, see if anything interesting pops up, and then I'm gonna close off with some final thoughts. A tale of two Claudes. So we got the two boys here side by side, and as you can tell, first of all, see that thing I was telling you about when I said that more detail doesn't necessarily make it look better? In this one here, he looks like a young man on the just out pounding pavement, and then over here he looks like a 40-something divorcee, chain smoking, type person. So yeah, the addition of the extra details did not help here at all. But at the very least, you can say, oh yeah, he's got a bit more contrast now because we have more texture space to run with. But if you really want to see why, like look at the polygonal difference. Okay, look at how dense this one is versus this other one. Now you could say, okay, this is Unreal Engine triangulation, but they still could have done a way better job optimizing this model. Now they did, as I mentioned earlier, add the fingers, which yay, but no one really asked for this. Why'd I say it like that? But yeah, it still would have been expected. They did add a little belt to him over here. As you can see, the other Claude just has it painted on, like onto the texture. See? Let's select that segment there. Control H. You see? His is just painted on because it's part of the texture, which is pretty, like I said, very 2000s. We have limited space. Let's work with what we got type logic there. And me personally, again, could be the nostalgia talking, but I find this model a lot more appealing than this one here. It's, yes, it does have more detail. Yes, you can see the little fabric-y cloths. Yes, you can see the everything, but this doesn't hit the same. They feel like this doesn't look like the same person. Okay, this does not, to me, feel like the same person. At least maybe it's the 5 o'clock shadow. I don't know. But besides that, I think that's everything. There's they could have optimized it so much better. They could have maybe leaned into the cartooniness a bit more, but what you gotta do, huh? Anyway, thanks for coming out, and just let me know what you think. Would you prefer this type, quick, pointed, direct model reviews, or do you prefer the old school style where I just pop up with the mic and let it rip? You let me know. Let me know. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll be seeing you